presentation. Thank you for your time. Please give Drew a hand of applause. And let me now welcome our next speaker, Piraiee, who does not come from Poland, but he's been busy working in Poland for a number of years, and he's earned a reputation of somewhat of an insider particularly in some innovative technologies, in the field of innovative technologies. And today he's going to speak about IPOs, ICOs, STOs, differences, advantages, and disadvantages. Please welcome Piraiee.
Okay. Good afternoon. Wow, it's very hard to just come right after an American guy because they're very good at presenting themselves, so they keep the bar high. I'm just going to start before my slides are also going to be ready. Do you know what is the first thing that we all believe in? And I can tell you it's not God, so go for something else. That's money. Money is one constant that we all believe in, so we don't have to really just debate about that or something. So for me, especially coming to an investment and banking conference, I really feel like, I'm Christopher Hitchens and I'm just basically trying to promote atheism among in a church. So bear in mind, I also came after a very crypto-agnostic guy. And I have half an hour in order to basically try to change all of your mind, hopefully, or at least try to bring something more into the whole, bigger picture. I think if you just put the, F5, I'm just gonna do it. As you can see, I also know a little bit about IT. So, guys, let's just be a little bit more democratic. I have half an hour. Do you want to have 5 minutes for Q&A or 10 minutes? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, I'm gonna have another question. How many of you want to raise your hand? Okay, so thank you. I know that we have like 10% of everything in order to just go forward. First of all, I want to basically talk about IPOs, STOs, and ICOs at the same time, due to a very important reason, that if you are not going to go to the STO part, it is not going to be very interesting for a lot of you guys. So that's the first thing I wanted to let you know. What I usually try to do is, first of all, try to introduce myself, to say why I'm trying to come here and try to talk about it, number one. Number two, you have to know that usually when I try to speak, I organize workshops. So that is a far longer conversation with far more details before starting to go into the details of that. To say, I don't want to talk about cryptocurrencies, I'm not going to sell anybody anything, I'm not a financial advisor, none of these things are basically things that is going to help you in anything. It's just opening up a new line of thoughts. Number two, about me. So I have an IT background, so I know a little bit about what is happening from the behind the scene point of view. And at the same time, I also worked a bit in the financial sector. So I also know a little bit about, how to do wealth management and some other stuff like that. So almost back in 2012, 2013, when I just heard about the whole idea of Bitcoin and all the other stuff, I started to get to know the idea. And frankly speaking, I never thought about it with anyone. It was just a thing that I was just going through the other people who knew, because I totally also agree that for a lot of reasons, we are not still, even right now, ready to talk about it, because a lot of these things are unfortunately a lot of hypes and a lot of things that needs far more deliberation before really try to go to details of that. So just to tell you, and my main activity is basically media and communication. So I try to get any kind of business and then try to make it as it is and then try to present it, including businesses that somehow are related to blockchain and ICOs, because we can talk about blockchain and ICOs and IPOs and any other things without even going to the financial sector, because they have some usabilities in the commerce. They can basically be used as some sort of a database, because there is no base. That's why it's not exactly a database. They call it a linked data, and many other aspects. So this is basically who is the guy who's here. The second part, the target audience. So in many part of my presentation, you are going to see that I'm going to talk about mainly small and medium businesses. We can also call them startups to some extent. Not that because you're startups, because hopefully some of these things might be interesting for your clients, or even somehow for diversification of the people that are somehow involved there. Why? Because high risk is not usually something that you just try to sit down with the CEO of JP Morgan and then try to say that, hey, have you ever thought about that? That would be a little bit like, during the weekend you have Jehovah's Witness just ringing on the bell. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to convert with that. So we're just going to make it small. We're just going to hopefully have some smaller companies, medium companies to understand it. That's why some of the examples are not exactly addressed to bigger corporations. Also for you guys, that is my main perception. You can try to correct me if, this is not that accurate, but I really try to address people that they're very knowledgeable regarding the financial part. They are very good also with the investment part, but precisely know a bit about ICOs because that was the hype that it was almost 1.5 years. Everybody just, got a bit of it. And not that much know about what STO is. Know moderately better about what IPO is. And decentralized technology is not also something that they do, but again, they know something about it. So we started talking about what is the main topic. So it's not about blockchain or something. It's just we're talking about another method of fundraising. So usually where companies wanted to do that, they would go with angel investors, they would go with some seed funds, bank loans if they're going to be more traditional, and then go with Series A and B and other methods. These are what usually you call the pre-IPO way of basically just raising the fund. Again, you guys, as I mentioned, I'm not going to really try to go through the details of that. We're just going to say that a little bit about what IPO is. Is there anybody who doesn't know IPO? Okay, so I'm just going to go a little bit. So the process of offering shares to a private corporation, in a new stock issuance. So this is a very regular thing, at least if you don't know the regulation or the process, how it works. At least this is a very obvious thing that I don't think anybody has never heard of IPO or a company goes public. Again, they're going to be exactly the same thing. Second part of that, companies must meet requirements by exchange and SEC to hold an IPO. By the way, I'm mainly talking about the US market in case that's not going to be the point because, again, half an hour and going to different jurisdictions, that will be a totally different part. And then after that, IPOs have to provide basically, for the IPO, basically the companies can gain another level of capital after those seeds and Series A and Series Bs. And companies have to hire investment bankers to market, gauge demand, and at the same time set the IPO price and its strike. This is mainly the biggest part that a lot of companies are going to struggle. Because also when you want to do an IPO, sometimes you have to spend a lot of money, you have to be very sizable, and in the end, you just end up just saying that it's better not to do an IPO. But nobody's going to give you money back. So that's also a very strange part that we have to definitely look. And people usually look at it as an exit. So the moment you have it, you basically are not the same company and you have different features. As you can see with some companies like Snapchat or with Uber, there are not always happy stories when it comes to IPO. You see some people like Warren Buffett is like, I never even, invest in an IPO. So they are very conservative people that they're still even looking at right now, IPOs might not be the best option. Then we go with something called initial coin offering. So for a lot of people, this is good, but maybe not on earth, more in heaven, where nobody hopefully would lie to people and everybody can trust everybody without having any problems. Why? Because first of all, entrepreneurs look and launch new ideas that they can do it through an ICO by a variety of different reasons. If any one of you guys think it's stupid to have an ICO, just please go to Hollywood and talk to one of the producers. Because when you are a Hollywood producer, just anybody, Martin Scorsese would just come to you with one piece of paper and was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And if you think ICO makes a lot of money, that piece of paper might give Martin Scorsese a few $1 million, 10 times more than that, or even $1 billion, depending on the type of the movie you want to do. So the whole idea of basically funding in a startup or funding an idea based on a small piece of paper might not be something that an investment banker really just know about it, but trust me, there are other people that they do far bigger risks, and at the same time, they will get a bigger reward because of that. So this is basically what ICO was. That, first of all, you would be a part of a movement. You're not going to lose the ownership of your company when you're participating in ICO. Imagine that when you were a kid, you were in Casablanca and you watched a movie. And you knew that this movie is going to be amazing. And you took tickets out of that. What can you do with that ticket? You can just be proud of that. You cannot sell it, you cannot give it to other people. This is just what you have, and nobody can somehow compensate you for somehow trying to be a part of that movie that you loved, that was a part of your past. But with the ICO, You don't own the movie, but you have a piece of the movie because you appreciated the movie, because you participated in it. The value of the thing could go up or down. We're still talking about utilities, so I'm not trying to say that you really have to just buy the ticket in order to be rich in the end. I'm just saying that buy the ticket to watch the movie, aka utilities, not securities. The most important thing is that, unfortunately, in the ICO, the only thing that you really needed to have was just a website. And just some stock photos from some random people that basically never did anything. And you also tell them that I'm going to give you 5,000 shitcoins or, like good coins. We had a very interesting project. Also, I was in the speaker in another conference, totally investment banking. And we had one ICO that was the investor, sponsor. And then after that, they were supposed to give 10,000 their coins. I promise you that was $5, in a valuation. And the moderator, he had no idea what cryptocurrency is. So he came on a stage and he said that, by the way, that was the end of 2018. Bitcoin was like $15,000. And he says that, ladies and gentlemen, the award for after this ICO presentation is going to be 5,000 Bitcoin. And everybody was like, okay, so everybody's gonna go home and one person is gonna be a billionaire. And I was like, no, it's not Bitcoin, it's our coin. I was like, okay, so it's like Bitcoin, but this is a different coin. And I was like, no. So literally what I'm telling you is that the whole things that they printed was more expensive than the money that this person was supposed to take. Just to tell you that a lot of people, unfortunately, didn't understand the idea of 5,000 of something might worth nothing. That was a huge problem. Take a look at this, and I hope this is going to help you. This is even before I started it. And that is the market. You basically don't see anything. So there were small startups trying to do the ICO as a form of fundraising. And as you can see, also you can see the jurisdiction. So started with stateless, unknowns, because there were a lot of anonymity in the whole thing. So nobody even knew where the money came from. And at the same time, as you can see, more and more people started to do KYC, and things gets a little bit more into IDs and understanding things. Then Europe came, North America, still, as you can see, very conservative, and still the biggest part are people that are still using a lot of anonymity. Ethereum came along, and as you can see, it was a big deal till the second thing comes. So the DAO came, and that was a huge bubble, because then later, basically, all of the money just, basically faded away, till we almost went to the end of 2017. And if you don't believe in the bubble, take a look at what happened in this side. So, yeah. So this is basically 2018, where everybody started to convert into the religion of ICOs. And if you didn't believe any of that is going to work, even without telling any one of their friends or families, that anybody started investing in something. And we basically have to stop at, the end of 2018. That was basically the biggest part. So this is the image that right now we see. So from something very small, we end up having some massive market that every one of these tokens have to have their own ideas and their own usability. So any one of them is not money. They're all different sources of storing values. Some of them are being used in order to basically use it as also a form of payment. Some of them are being used as infrastructure. So we cannot really say I don't believe in the cryptocurrencies, because some of them are basically tokens. If you believe in Swift, you can believe in XRP. If you basically using cloud, you can have a decentralized cloud. So every one of them have different usabilities. The biggest challenge that ICOs try to fix is the idea that you could basically do something off IPO, but not to be as big. Because if you look at most IPOs, they have to be beyond 1 billion valuation. They have to be big companies and sizable companies in order to go forward. Is there any way I can still check the time? Okay. Just wanted to see how much more time I have.
You have 15 minutes.
15 minutes, perfect, thank you. And that was one of the main reasons that a lot of companies really started to like ICOs, because they could start at any point. And again, we started to somehow regulate a very different environment outside of the financial sector with utilities and the tools that we had inside the financial sector. So the closest thing I can tell you in the beginning of 2017 and 2018 was the idea of having at least different type of tokens. So ERC20 tokens are the utility tokens, most of those big circles that you saw there. ERC 1400 is the security token, what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And also 1410, that is the partially fungible tokens. That it's common the last version that we can try to go through the details of that. I can tell you, and again, this is not from me as a lawyer or from me as a financial advisor, that 99.9% of those tokens cannot pass the Huawei test. So if you really try to look at it, and if you really go step by step, they all are going to miss at least one of these 4 steps, because if you are trying to do something and then you don't want to basically being registered as security, you have to pass these 4 tests. And I'm telling you that none of those things can do that. That is why most of them try to get out of the SEC and then try to go to different jurisdictions to do that, or try to somehow go in the gray area. That is the reason that a lot of lawyers started to basically partnering up with ICOs in order to make them work. So we're going to have a small comparison between the IPOs, ICOs, and STOs, and we're going to be a little bit more practical with it. So the main part is that IPO is strictly regulated and imposed by the government. It might be good, it might not be good. Second part of that is the bank account is required, and not everybody have a bank. So if you can imagine, there are a lot of unbanked that can also somehow participate, but due to a lot of problems, they cannot do that. And the startup forfeit the control and ownership of the company. So at the same time, what if there will be another idea that you could still keep the ownership of your company while getting another source of income? And it's a very expensive process that taken up to 6 months. I mean, 6 months is a very optimistic way of talking about an IPO. That means like you're a very mature company in this context. And at the same time, your competition is going to have an eye on what you're doing and everything else. You also need an MVP, prototype, and even a working product, unless, like you're going to have something that is going to be super strong. So this is always the case. Versus the ICO, no regulatory framework. You could basically, as I mentioned, just have a piece of paper, a crypto wallet, and any one of you guys, you can just go to, like your mobile phone, and in 5 minutes you're going to have a wallet. So it's much easier than having a bank. Not backed by anything. Basically, this is an appreciation coin. Anybody who tells you cryptocurrencies in the ICO is something more than that, that is not the whole picture. It is an appreciation coin. And I was like, guys, I love Apple. I'm just going to say thank you. But this time, this thank you is going to be also with a, like a piece of a token that is going to be a part of it. It's completely anonymity for investment via blockchain. So depending on which kind of cryptocurrencies you use, you can also be totally anonymous. You don't have to go through a lot of the KYC processes. No MVP is also needed. A lot of these things are just ideas. Versus STOs, that they are regulated by a KYC and NML, different a little bit than the IPO. Startups don't need to forfeit control of ownership of the company. We will talk about it with details. And investment rights such as the voting and the revenue are there. So you're not just going to have a token of appreciation this time. No, this is far more practical than the other solutions. The part that is a little bit complicated, because a lot of people say, oh, cryptocurrency, black market and everything. Other people say, oh, cryptocurrencies, a lot of transparency, and no. So we're going to stay in the middle to understand which parts have to be exactly transparent and which parts cannot basically be, in the dark zone that basically lead to some illegal activities. And also fractional ownership. So imagine that you want to buy a super expensive painting for one of your clients, but your client can pay 70% of that or 7% of that. Can all be done. Also to talk about the fact that what we're talking is not some hypothetical and this is just a matter of like nobody would believe in it. This is the current market of the STOs. So especially you see the reverse idea that right now United States is having a massive share of the market when it comes to the security token offerings. Comparing to the rest of the world, also you have to bear in mind that Cayman Island and other places are in the part of the whole, the Northern American share. I can share this whole graphs and everything, so you can just read it with details. I don't think in my time I can try to do that. Why STOs are really getting a good momentum? Because that's the first time that you can see the same regulatory bodies and the part that they are massively, are working inside the normal investment bankings and investment in general. Now they are basically having a very active participation in the securities and tokens that not all of them are also related to cryptocurrencies. You can participate with the fiat currency without having any problem. Lots of different authorities also right now are involved, from Switzerland to Japan to United States, Germany, name it. Most of these countries right now, they have a specific regulation for security token offerings that you don't really have to worry about any one of these things regarding offering it to your clients or you using it by yourself. But why do we really need to have STOs? First of all, a very high level of efficiency. It's much more available than the other counterparts. It's far more transparent. The liquidity, security, and legality. And also, especially the fact of liquidity is another thing that Eric mentioned that, it's not available, and then we're going to talk about why. First thing, I will definitely want to talk about the real estate, because this is one of the solutions that one of my clients is suffering, and I also try to tell you that how you can basically participate in any part of that. That the real estate is one of the most popular and promising assets that can be tokenized. So if you can have a land or a building or an apartment, you can basically do the same level of investment, but this time the same investor, for example from China, that right now they cannot invest in another territory, including United States, they can participate in the same thing, but far more efficient, with far more level of trust, and at the same time, basically anybody from any part of the world can just do the same thing. Equity in business. So the tokenize of business. So it is not exactly your shares, but you basically do one-to-one tokenized shares versus your real shares or your real assets. And then you can basically compromise the area of the ICO. So it enables all the share of the business entirely, and this can also basically be additional money to develop your company. So if you're really looking for another source for your company, this can be in any size or any capacity, you can use STOs for that. Investment funds. Even if you have a fund and you're looking for extra amount of funds for your company, that's a perfect idea. Right now, a lot of venture capitals from the UK and other countries, they are really trying to do another solution that you can have a pre-IPO investment, that you can exactly invest in the startups and small and medium businesses without worrying about the details of that. So by tokenizing those startups and really having a tangible asset behind those tokens, you can easily invest in a startup even outside of your jurisdiction. So a VC in the UK can easily invest in a startup in Poland without forcing them to be in London or an American investor in order to bring them to Delaware. Asset. In theory, any objects can be tokenized. That can basically be a painting, it can be some precious metals, cars, jewelries, so on and so forth. A lot of problem, unfortunately, when we're talking about diamonds, when we're talking about gold and silver, is that it's really hard to really trust the other party. So you have a lot of middlemen that makes the whole product more expensive, it makes it really hard to trust them, and so many other things that makes the product basically more expensive. So you have to pay far more amount of middleman's commission in order to have it. Now, by tokenizing it, you're going to have almost a one-to-one conversation. Is going to be far more interesting. Not just talk about theory, this is basically the recipe that everything basically starts from there. Number one, you start from a security token, you try to have some real world asset, you try to have some unlocked liquidity, you add both of them into a regulated digital asset, you put all of them into a programmable ownership. You don't precisely need to have a specific lawyers and specific agreements, and regarding the compliance, this can even be far more transparent even for governments and for authorities in order to understand how these things work, because everything is automatic. After all of these things, you generate a smart contract that through the just smart contract, the ownership can be transferred from a company to an individual. So you're going to have a more automated compliance, you're going to have a fractional ownership. As I mentioned, you can have a part of a painting or a part of a super precious piece of whatever, like a precious metal or anything else that you can have a part of it, because your client doesn't have the money to have the whole product for themselves. You can have a free market exposure. As I mentioned, you can gain international investors that before they didn't have the jurisdiction, and low fee due to not so many people are going to be a part of that. So when we're talking about most of these things, there are also companies that they're really helping with the compliance part of that. So they already are not selling anything, but rather they are trying to create infrastructure that you can use it. For example, like the company T0 is using right now the same thing, so you can try to use their product for whatever you want to do. The free market exposure, many of the speakers were mentioning regarding why, for example, like you have to be in Georgia, why you have to be in the United States and other places. But at the same time, if you really try to understand how this STO market works, with all the acceptance from all of those security authorities, you can still see that you can expand your horizon and you can try to get more people just by using the STOs. Fractional ownership, as I mentioned, if you have a vintage car or if you saw something super unique and you basically say that, okay, so this is X amount of $1 billion, but my investment can only be this part of that. You can easily have it without worrying that they're going to sell it to 20 people, and at the same time, you can easily just make sure that you secure it and nobody else is going to take it later from you. A lot of other ways you can do exactly everything I mentioned, but the fact of this automation, the fact of having almost a trustless platform for it, it also helps you, to have the whole thing. Before I will take the 5 minute, I put the Q&A up that, I stuck to the 5 minute part of that for the Q&A. I didn't want to make it too theoretical. That's why I really hope that I'm going to have some questions to answer something more practical. So I will be happy to hear. That includes you also.
Let me first challenge the audience to ask some question, but if no question is coming from the audience, then it will be my pleasure to inquire about the payment mechanism. How do you pay your money into the system to acquire the tokens, and how do you exit? How do you pay out?
I mean, we can talk about the details of that, but if any one of you guys right now, for example, I use some platforms, even there was a mention of Revolut in the previous speech, you can see that really right now currency, we can say it's agnostic, meaning that if you take your money in the Revolut, you can even right now have it in Ethereum or Bitcoin. But when you want to cash it out, again, you can try to instantly just change it to US dollar, euro, and everything. It depending on which currency is the most favorable things to you. I was watching one of these TV shows in the US, I think it was Big Bang Theory, and they were in a coffee shop, so they were just sharing the tips. There was this jar in the US, a very common thing, just you have all the coins there, and the last coin was like, there was €1 and one button. And then there were two, and I was like, so which one do you want, the button or the euro? And I was like, give me the button, at least this button is gonna help me someday, So it depends on which currency you like. You can either use the button or use the euro. And this is the point. So you can basically just inject the cryptocurrencies and take the cryptocurrencies. You can basically get the fiat and take the fiat out, no matter what. I also really don't want to say if you had 10,000 Bitcoins and you wouldn't buy 2 pizzas with it, what would happen? We had a very interesting news yesterday regarding Nasper. And if any one of you guys know Nasper in South Africa, the whole story that happened was that this guy, almost the same amount of time that Bitcoin arrived, he invested something like 32 million in Tencent, and now he has $170 billion. So I'm just trying to tell you that Bitcoin is not the messiah. I'm just trying to say that any one of these solutions are one of those very interesting ways to do that. So even if you still believe in dollar or euro, you can basically just in fiat and out fiat. But the reality is that inside a smart contract, you need a cryptocurrency in order to operate it.
Okay, thank you very much. The message from Ahmad's presentation is very promising to all of us. Any new business cannot do without capable and wise consultants. In other words, us here in this room. Thank you very much, Ahmad, for this very lovely message. And now let's thank Ahmad for his presentation. And at the same time, I would like to welcome our Master of Ceremony to make the finale for our conference. For now, thank you, Ahmad, very much. And Urs, we are very interested to hear